Discover the incredible transformation. She married a poor rancher and found his hidden mansion. Sarah's heart raced as she stared at the dusty windows of the old barn, a once glorious structure that seemed to echo her own buried ambitions. Just months ago she had felt the thrill of possibility bursting within her, a vibrant hope that she might break free from the suffocating grasp of small-town monotony as the local elementary school teacher. Now, though, she was drowning. Struck with the realization that the man she loved, Jake, thrived in the very simplicity that had chafed her skin for years. "What have I done?" she whispered into the empty space that surrounded her, a mixture of joy and dread knotting in her stomach. It was a strange dichotomy, the life she envisioned for herself and the life she had chosen. With each sunrise over the Montana plains, Sarah desired so desperately to reclaim her dreams of leading, of changing lives, of being celebrated for the hard work she valued. Yet how would she fit them into the chaos of ranch life? Could her ambitions spike amidst the muck and sweat of cattle? Jake's rugged charm brought her palpable joy, but he was just a rancher, one of those poor locals who held on to a legacy littered with old barnwood and dusty trails. As tension coiled tighter in her chest, doubt whispered cold intentions. Each time she stepped out into the world and faced the narrow-minded crowds of their town, she felt vulnerability gnaw at her confidence. Who was she to claim a place alongside him when so many looked upon them with scrutinizing eyes? She wasn't sure if they saw love or their stark differences. Each glance she caught from the judgmental elite struck her like a slap, a constant reminder of her insecurities. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With stress mounting, Sarah tiptoed through the ranch, feeling like an outsider in her own home. Her heart sank further when she ventured into an old shed one humid afternoon. As she rummaged through decades of history, her fingers grazed a weathered journal, the pages filled with stories that once embraced dreams, but now pinpointed failures. As she read Jake's grandfather's entries, excitement bubbled to the surface. A hidden mansion lay buried beneath layers of dust and neglect. The thrill of discovery ignited the fire in her restless soul. But with that spark arose a tidal wave of fear. What if they couldn't restore it? What if the community's disapproval crushed their aspirations? Just then, Sarah sensed the weight of knowing the truth, the unearthing of her hopes clashing painfully with her reality. Dread seeped further into her bones as whispers of status and class swirled around her, clawing at her self-worth. Would the ranch ever be enough? Could she prove herself in an unforgiving world that seemed poised to laugh at their ambition? A single thought struck her. Restoring Jake's family legacy was more than a job. It was a battle against the ghosts of success, as haunting as the crumbling mansion hidden away from view. She glanced at the journal one last time, feeling its weight pressing down like the pressures of love and ambition, battling within her. Uncertainty twisted tighter around Sarah, deepening her resolve to face the coming storm. Sarah stood in the dim light of the shed, clutching the tattered journal as if it were a lifeline thrown into the depths of her turmoil. The roughened paper felt both foreign and familiar, its content threatening to unearth her well-guarded dreams and deep-seated fears. With every word she absorbed, her admiration for Jake's family history grew, but so did her apprehension about how they could ever realize the ambitious vision dancing in her mind. She bit her lip, the scruples bubbling up inside her demanding attention. Amid the rusted tools and decades of neglected memories, she sensed the weight of expectations pressing down, merging her insecurities with a budding determination. The mansion could spark a new chapter, a symbol of hope, creativity, and ambition. But could it also validate her feelings of inadequacy, the persistent echo of doubt that clung to her every decision? Rather than succumb to despair, Sarah resolved to confront these fears head-on. Seeing the potential hidden in both the mansion and within herself, an idea began to crystallize. She could organize a community project. They would restore the mansion together, breathing life back into the very core of Jake's legacy. But this wasn't just about the structure. It was about bridging the divide between her aspirations and the stark reality of ranch life. Yet, as that thought took root, a different narrative began to loom. Who was she to lead such an ambitious endeavor? The same town that celebrated her as a teacher had also been quick to scorn the ranchers, marking the borders between success and failure with rigid precision. The disapproval she feared could become a roar loud enough to drown her out before she even began. Dystopian visions of her fellow townsfolk judging her, mocking her efforts, gnawed at her resolve. What if they saw this project as an affront, a slap to their traditional way of life? She could already picture their scornful whispers. She thinks she can change everything with some old wood and paint, but what would it matter if they didn't approve? A flicker of defiance ignited within her. She had always dreamed of making a difference, of inspiring change. Maybe they didn't need to understand. It could begin with a few brave souls willing to join her and help forge a new chapter, one that could exist alongside the ranching life Jake cherished. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotion and planning. Sarah transformed the dusty journal's pages into a vision board, mapping out the restoration project, jotting down every detail. Ideal layouts, necessary costs, and potential community engagement. She reached out to local artisans and builders, sharing her dreams and vision, embracing collaboration over isolation. With each interaction, Sarah's confidence grew, blossoming into something unfamiliar yet exhilarating. The project took shape, and with it, possibilities coursed through her veins. Maybe this was her true path, one that combined ambition and community, a revitalization not just of the mansion but of her own identity. As the first community meeting approached, her palms were slick with anxiety. Could she speak her truth, gathering support from those who may not believe in what she stood for? As she rehearsed her speech in front of the mirror, a surge of confidence pushed through the doubt. "You have something to contribute," she reminded herself, pressing her fingers against the mirror, steadying her gaze. The time had come to face the criticism, for better or worse. She turned back toward the journal, gazing at Jake's grandfather's words. "Don't let fear steal your dreams," they whispered. It was her turn, and despite the risk, she felt ready, even if her voice trembled. Just as Sarah began to feel a sense of hope, a knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Jake on the other side, concern etched across his feature. "I need to talk to you about something important." The weight of his words hung in the air, cloaked in unresolved tension as Sarah's stomach churned with uncertainty about what was coming next. Would he support her plans, or would he throw cold water on her burgeoning ambitions? Sarah held her breath, the tension thickening between them. Jake stepped inside, his body language uncharacteristically cautious. This was not the enthusiastic partner she had come to trust. This was someone burdened by worry. What could be so serious that it would summon her from the verge of her carefully planned future? "Let's sit," he suggested, motioning to the battered workbench that had previously been a gathering place for laughter and stories. She hesitated, then nodded, forcing her legs to carry her toward the bench. The journal lay forgotten for the moment, its vibrant promise dimmed by the shadow of Jake's intensity. It made her heart race. His anxiety became palpable, infusing the space between them with uncertainty. "Sarah, I've been thinking about the mansion restoration." His gaze held hers firmly, as if searching for the right words that would bridge the chasm of his doubts. She felt a flicker of hope, yet an undercurrent of fear gnawed at her confidence. "What about it?" With a deep breath, he continued, "I love the idea, I really do. But you need to know, my family has had complications around it. There are memories there that are not just a joke or a dream. They're heavy. My grandfather's legacy is both a treasure and a burden." His admission struck a nerve and Sarah's stomach twisted. Memories of Jake's laughter over the fence, jokes about the old ghost stories rumored to linger in the mansion, flashed before her mind. Now, those stories anchored him to a reality that felt inexplicably fraught. Conflicts she hadn't prepared for. I appreciate your concerns, but what if the restoration can turn those burdens into something beautiful? We need to reclaim that space, Jake. It could symbolize renewal, not just for the mansion but for everyone who carries the weight of this town's history, she argued, desperation seeping into her tone. Jake's expression softened momentarily. She recognized the glimmer of hope that mirrored her own. However, lingering doubt clouded his gaze. It's not that simple. There are people in this town who will see your project as a threat, not a gift. I can already hear the murmurs of disapproval. Her heart raced again, but this time it was propelled by frustration. Are you saying I should back down? Let their fear dictate our actions? This is our chance to reshape their perspective. The echo of her own voice once again beckoned her to confront her fears. Not back down. I just think we need to approach this carefully. I want you to succeed, but we can't ignore the town's past. The conflict in his eyes deepened, torn between protecting her aspirations and his own family's shadow. At that moment, Sarah realized her journey was not only about bringing the mansion back to life, it was about dismantling the barriers Jake and the town had erected. Her mind raced, not just with what she needed to say, but also with fierce determination not to be sidelined. How could she get both him and the community on board? Then let's start a dialogue, she pressed, fueled by a newfound clarity. I can present the plans, detail the benefits, and invite them into the conversation instead of letting them linger in criticism. It can be a collaborative effort, beginning with transparency. As she spoke, a spark ignited in Jake's eyes, and she could see him grappling with the idea, the potential of marrying his family's story with hers in a constructive, positive way. But a deeper fear darkened the corners of her excitement. Although she felt a strategy forming, could she endure the judgments that would ensue? The walls of her own misgivings, layered with Jake's concerns, felt claustrophobic. Have courage, Sarah. Convincing them will not be easy, Jake murmured. What they think doesn't define what we can create. I'm willing to confront it all, even if it means inviting criticism, she stated fiercely, channels opening within her that had long been shuttered. Can you? His voice held a note of skepticism. Yes, I can, she declared, pulling strength from the well of her aspirations. As Jake seemed to contemplate her resolve, they were met with the sudden weight of silence. The underlying uncertainty felt heavy, marked by the tension that lingered between them. Would he rally beside her, or would doubt keep him at arm's length? She felt the stirring of resolve, yet tinged with the fear of outright rejection. As they faced this turning point in their conversation, an unsettling thought gripped Sarah. Would Jake trust her vision enough to stand with her, or would this project inadvertently chisel a divide between their intertwined paths? The weight of silence bore down on Sarah as she awaited Jake's response. Each passing second felt like an eternity, an unyielding reminder of the fragile state of their partnership. She felt exposed, vulnerable in the honesty she had offered. Had she pushed too far too soon? Then Jake looked up, his brows knitting together in deep thought. All right, let's start that conversation. But this will require more than just a presentation. It demands empathy, understanding the fears of those who see this mansion as a ghost of their past. He paused, a mix of admiration and apprehension in his gaze. Can you really address that? His question lingered, a challenge wrapped in an invitation. The heaviness in her chest lightened slightly, an acknowledgement that Jake was willing to join her on this path, despite the apprehension it wrought. Absolutely, she said, a fire igniting within her. I can talk to them, listen to their stories. Getting them involved might be the key to turning their fears into hope. The idea resonated, but as visionary as it was, the implications rippled through her mind like a stone cast into a pond. How would she navigate the intricate web of emotions tied to the mansion's history? Could she truly engage the town and earn their trust? Jake responded with a nod, albeit cautious. You know, I don't want you to underestimate how difficult it could be. The past holds weight here, and most folks are resistant to change. He looked away, lost in thought, then added softly, especially people who remember the mansion as it once was. His words dripped with the haunting stories he had known since childhood, tales that had once been playful and now felt laced with apprehension. Whether he recognized it or not, Jake was still grappling with the legacy of that mansion. It wasn't just his grandfather's memory. It was woven into the fabric of their shared history, something he felt bound to protect. "I'm ready for the challenge," Sarah replied, her voice steady. She realized she wasn't simply advocating for a building. She was fighting for a vision that could enrich lives, change perceptions, and unfold new beginnings. With resolve pulsating through her, she leaned forward. "The foundation of my plan is clear communication. I'll invite others to share their voices, their memories. It'll be uncomfortable, but transparency is key. Will you stand beside me during this?" Jake scanned her face, his uncertainty shifting toward contemplation. "As long as you know it may become emotionally taxing. This won't be a simple task," he cautioned. "I hope you're prepared for possible backlash. There are powerful sentiments attached to that place." His straightforward approach sharpened her awareness, grounding her in the reality that awaited them. Yet, beneath that acknowledgement lay a steely determination. Finding her voice, opening dialogue, and confronting the town's hesitancy was merely the first step. "Bring it on," she responded, her tone firm. "Understanding what we're up against is part of the battle, but I believe in the value of this project, not just for us, but for the community. They deserve better than lingering fears. They deserve a chance to reclaim hope." After a moment, Jake broke the tension with a tentative smile. For the first time that evening, he seemed lighter, his own resolve crystallizing alongside hers. "I admire your conviction. Perhaps that strength is what's needed to challenge the town's fears." Confidence surged within Sarah, an affirmation of her vision, but lurking in the background was the unnerving thought of potential failure. Would her passion galvanize the necessary support, or would it unravel before her eyes? Despite the uncertainty, she knew one thing. This was her moment to embrace vulnerability, to use her insights and resilience. Tonight marked the shift from passive dreamer into active changemaker. Every conversation, every encounter with the townsfolk, would be a step toward forging connections. As they sat together in the dim light of the workshop, Sarah felt the weight of ambition lift slightly. She was no longer in the shadow of reluctance. Instead, she stood poised on the brink of a new chapter, armed with a growing purpose and the belief that change was possible. And then a thought rifled through her, igniting fresh trepidation and excitement in equal measure. What if the town's response was far worse than even Jake feared? She yearned for acceptance, for collaboration, yet the specter of rejection loomed large. As her pulse quickened, a question hung palpably in the air. Was she truly ready to take on this challenge and risk everything to breathe life into a place that held the weight of both past and future? The morning sun broke through the workshop windows, casting long shadows that danced on the floor as Sarah prepared for her first meeting with the townsfolk. The air was thick with anticipation, and with each passing moment, she wrestled with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. This was it, the moment that could either validate her efforts or seal her fate. She'd spent the night planning, jotting down notes and potential conversation starters. Yet as she looked at the jumbled collection of thoughts, doubt crept in. What if the townsfolk were unwilling to share their stories? Or worse, what if they met her ideas with hostility? The flicker of uncertainty cast a shadow on her resolve. Taking a deep breath, Sarah reminded herself of her purpose. She wasn't just bringing a project to life. She was hoping to heal wounds, to ignite a sense of belonging tied to the mansion that had long been a relic of fear. With Jake at her side, the first meeting unfolded in the town hall, a quaint structure filled with memories of quiet town meetings and hasty decisions. Voices murmured as familiar faces turned toward her, eyes filled with skepticism tinged with curiosity. "Thank you all for coming," she began, an unexpected tremor in her voice. "I stand before you not just as an outsider with a plan, but as someone who believes that we can reclaim what has been lost. She spoke from the heart, recalling the remnants of the mansion, the stories she had uncovered during her research. She needed them to see the potential that lay dormant within those walls. Yet for every word she offered, she felt a rising wall of resistance. The townspeople's expressions were a collage of memories, fear, anger, nostalgia. She pressed on, determined to chip away at their defenses. As she shared her vision of the mansion transformed into a vibrant space for community activities, murmurs of dissent spread like wildfire. An elderly man, his voice crackling with age, stood and interrupted. "That place is haunted. You can't bring back the past. What good will come of it?" His words struck her like a blow, stirring up the shadows of her doubt. She instinctively looked to Jake for support, but found him caught in his own battle with regret, staring at the floor. "Every story has a past, sir," Sarah replied, choosing her words carefully. "This mansion's history doesn't have to be a burden. It can be a bridge to something new." The man folded his arms, his skepticism only deepening. As tension built within the room, she felt the heat of disappointment rising in her chest. Was this what she had wanted? To be a target for their unresolved feelings? Jake finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "We can't disregard the importance of these memories, but we must also understand that change is a part of healing. Together, we can rewrite the mansion's story." His unexpected support calmed Sarah's storm inside. They were not in this alone. Both she and Jake were facing the haunting echo of that mansion's legacy. Yet as voices chimed in around the room, some offering tentative agreement while others remained belligerent, Sarah realized this was more than a conversation. It was a collective reckoning. A pivotal moment for herself and for Jake, who was still tangled in his own emotions surrounding the mansion's past. With each passing minute as the dialogue swelled, Sarah felt something inside her shift. The tension began to morph into an unfamiliar energy, a force propelling her forward. She had to build connections, no matter how difficult. "I can't promise you that this will be easy," she said, her voice breaking through the noise. "But I can promise you that your voices matter in this process. Will you share those voices with us?" The room fell silent for a brief moment. An elderly woman in the back hesitantly raised her hand, her expression softening as she spoke. "I remember when it was full of life, before things changed." And in that moment, Sarah understood. This was not about just raising hope. It was about redefining the past while embracing the emotional burden together. As the meeting continued, stories flowed, hesitant at first, then with increasing trust. Sarah's heart swelled with purpose, each shared voice building a collective tapestry of memory and possibility. But with every new story came the realization that she was not merely a facilitator. She was someone forging paths through history, stepping deeper into her own identity as a leader. Yet, just as the tension began to unravel, she felt the weight of a lurking darkness, an unspoken threat from within the town that might still dismantle their progress. Would the old sentiments resurface? Or could they truly begin to bridge the past with a new future? With resolve solidified but questions emerging, Sarah knew one thing for sure. The battle for this mansion, and her own trajectory, had only just begun, and it would be in the next meeting that she would discover just how deep the town's wounds truly ran. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. Each evening she would pore over her notes, replaying the meeting in her mind, dissecting every moment and word. The faces of the townsfolk lingered in her thoughts, some hesitant, others openly skeptical, yet the glimmer of hope she saw in a few eyes fueled her determination to keep forging ahead, despite the looming uncertainties. It became clear that her strategy to unite the townsfolk's memories would require more than just organized storytelling. The next meeting needed a different approach, a tangible way to connect them to the mansion, to its potential. She sketched out plans for a guided tour, one that would allow them to revisit the familiar, painful corners of their history and envision a revived now. "A tour," she murmured aloud to Jake one afternoon as they walked through the dilapidated gardens of the mansion. "We can ask them to bring their stories to life, to walk through these halls and remember what they loved or feared, Maybe then they'll start to see what it could be. Jake nodded, but his expression revealed his ongoing internal struggle. It's a solid idea, but not everyone will want to revisit those memories, Sarah. What if they resist? It could remind them of loss when they're trying to mend things. Her heart sank at the thought, but quickly rekindled with purpose. If we acknowledge the pain, if we invite it into the conversation, they may feel safe to express it. It's a step. Despite her stubborn, unwavering belief, she couldn't shake an unsettling sense that they were careening into a storm. Questions of how far people would be willing to open up plagued her. What dark secrets lay hidden within those walls? In the days leading up to the next meeting, she canvassed the mansion's halls, gaining comfort in their grandeur. One afternoon, while inspecting the old library, Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. A sudden rush of nostalgia washed over her as she imagined the hushed whispers and laughter that must have filled this space once. It was in those moments that she recognized her growing attachment to the mansion and what it stood for. That evening she sat alone in the workshop, the smell of sawdust lingering in the air, crafting models of her vision, the community space, the recreation rooms, the art area. Each piece she shaped revolved around the concept of rebirth. This was not merely about renovating a building. It was about rekindling community spirit. Determined, she crafted an invitation that evening, emphasizing the tour as a shared experience where stories could emerge freely. But then doubt crept in. What if her optimism was misplaced? What if the town recoiled rather than embraced? As the meeting day approached, Sarah felt the pressure mounting. With Jake's help, they set up the room in a more inviting manner, moving chairs into a circular formation, placing the models on display for everyone to see, hoping this visual might bridge the gap between memory and aspiration. But what hung over her like a storm cloud were the rumors swirling about the mansion. Whispers of those who claimed it was cursed, who lived in fear of its ghosts, haunted her thoughts. Could she transform a space associated with pain into one marked by hope? When the night finally arrived, she sensed the palpable tension in the air as townsfolk trickled in, their wary glances slicing through her confidence. Just as she was about to speak, the elderly man from before, the one who had declared the mansion haunted, entered with a noticeable scowl fueling her nerves. Swallowing hard, she clasped her notes tightly. The moment had arrived to confront not just the ghosts of the mansion, but the shadows within herself as well. As she gathered her thoughts and prepared to speak, she was struck with a daunting realization. It was more than just the past they were stepping into. It was a question of whether they could withstand the truth of what lay ahead. And as she took her place before the townsfolk, she knew she had to not only brace for their stories but also summon the inner strength to confront whatever darkness lay hidden in their hearts. The question lingered, echoing in her mind. Could she dispel the shadows that had loomed for too long, or would they consume her too? The murmurs from the crowd swirled around Sarah like a tempest as she looked out at the familiar yet daunting faces before her. Their skepticism felt palpable, hardening the resolve deep within her. She had prepared, her notes meticulous, the visuals aligning with her vision. But now she found herself wrestling with the weight of their collective history. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped forward, her voice quivering slightly at the onset, then steadying as she found her footing. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, allowing herself a moment to absorb the tension, to connect with those who sat before her. "I believe we share a bond with this mansion, not just as a building but as a keeper of our stories." As she spoke, she scanned the faces, searching for signs of engagement. In the back, the elderly man sat folded arms, a hardened gaze firmly fixed on her, a silent challenge for her to convince him otherwise. Her heart raced as she pressed on. "I understand that revisiting our past can be painful. Yet it's through confronting that pain that we can imagine a brighter future. This mansion holds our history. It is a part of us, even if the memories sting." A ripple of resistance met her words, but she pressed deeper. "Tonight I want to invite you to reconnect with this place, to bring forth not just sorrow but the laughter and warmth that thrived here once. We can reclaim it together." Her tentative encouragement ignited a few murmuring responses, people shifting in their seats, glancing at one another. It was then she noticed a flicker of hope shimmering in the eyes of a few attendees, a stark contrast to the somber shadows that surrounded them. Beth, a longtime resident, interjected, "How do we know this place won't hurt us again? It feels dangerous to look back." "Change always feels dangerous," Sarah replied, meeting Beth's gaze unwaveringly. "Transformations require hard work and courage. But what if this mansion could be a catalyst for healing, a space for new memories instead of old regrets?" At that moment, a realization crashed over Sarah. This was not just about rekindling their history, it was about reawakening their spirits. Stepping closer to her models, she pointed to the imagined art area, the community space where they could gather and celebrate. "Picture this. Where sorrow resides, let joy replace it. Where memories haunt us, let new stories take flight." As she spoke, Sarah found her own voice growing stronger, empowered with each moment of vulnerability shared. With each word, she felt the invisible walls dividing the townsfolk begin to crack. Yet the scowling man raised a hand, cutting through the burgeoning hope. "You're asking us to forget what haunts us, to ignore the past. How do we know this is not another fool's errand?" His voice was gruff, cutting to the bone. The challenge sparked a fire in Sarah. This wasn't just about the mansion, it was about forging a path through her doubts and those that surrounded her. "I'm not asking you to forget," she said firmly. "I'm asking you to share. Let's reveal the layers of hardship, sorrow, and regret, and then reach for something beyond that, to forge a future we can be proud of, together." As murmurs of agreement punctuated her speech, she felt the dawn of possibility warm her resolve. In facing their fears, she realized they were navigating uncharted waters, a tightrope of hope suspended over a sea of memories. However, as she continued to speak, a silent dread began to loom over her. What if the recounting of painful stories spiraled into uncontrollable chaos, revealing fractures too deep to mend? The risk felt monumental, but so too did the potential for healing. When the meeting finally wound down, as the townsfolk filed out one by one, Sarah remained, grounded in her plans yet electrified by the mixture of fear and possibility. She understood that the success of her mission depended not just on the memories within the mansion but also on her ability to navigate the shadows that hadn't yet emerged. As she stared at the darkened corners of the hall, she knew the real challenge lay ahead. Could she face the haunting histories head-on, leading the others into light, or would they succumb to the weight of their past? She took a deep breath, recognizing a newfound resilience. The next step toward introspection awaited her, and it would demand everything she had. Now it was time to confront not just their haunted stories, but the darkness that had shaped her own journey as well. Each ghost in the mansion echoed a part of herself waiting to be embraced, or exorcised. The silence left in the wake of the audience's departure echoed in the cavernous hall, amplifying Sarah's solitude. She could still feel the pressure of their skepticism, a weight that pressed heavily on her chest. Yet amidst the heaviness, she clung to the newfound determination weaving itself through her thoughts. The mansion was more than stone and wood. It was a living narrative waiting to be rewritten. But could she truly guide others through their wounds while grappling with her own? As the last echoes of footsteps faded, Sarah moved through the shadows of the mansion, allowing her fingertips to ghost along the surfaces of the walls. Each brush felt electric, almost as if the house itself wished to communicate its stories. Some dark, some light, all essential. With every step, her resolve solidified like concrete setting in place. She had unearthed not merely a project, she was standing at the threshold of change, for herself, and for those she sought to inspire. Yet an unsettling question loomed, twisting her stomach. What if her own reflections turned into shadows she was unprepared to confront? She had witnessed the town's anguish, but her own heart felt like a fragile vase teetering on the edge of a high shelf. Dizzying courage bubbled up at the prospect of vulnerability, but deep down, fear hissed like a serpent. Would exposing her own scars shatter the delicate bonds of trust she was attempting to build? Armed with her notes, she made her way to her small office set aside in a corner of the mansion. It was cluttered with books and artifacts that spoke of lives entwined with pain. She inhaled the dust of history mingling with a fresh determination. "You can do this," she muttered to herself, the words almost pitiful in their fragility, yet powerful enough to break the suffocating silence. Planning meticulously, she crafted a series of exploration sessions aimed at drawing out their intertwined histories. She knew each individual's story would be difficult, like untangling knots in time. Still, she refused to dismiss the research studies on memory and trauma that suggested facing these specters together could foster healing. Understanding their fears meant understanding her own. As the days turned into a week, Sarah dabbed the portraits of previous residents with paint, reshaping their visage to reflect warmth rather than sorrow. Yet, despite her ambition, each brushstroke felt heavy with doubt. Was she erasing history or redefining it? She was not only facing the people but also confronting her own failures and insecurities, an internal battleground ripe for the unraveling. On the cusp of her first story circle, she felt the same trepidation that had engulfed her at the earlier assembly. Would they see her as an authority, a probable savior, or merely another voice lost among their lamentations, an outsider attempting to dictate how they should mend their hearts? As she set up the room, arranging chairs in an inviting circle, she rehearsed her introduction, trying to project the expert she envisioned herself becoming. But in the mirror, she caught her own reflection, an image clashed by uncertainty and aspiration. Could she use her vulnerabilities as a strength, letting them connect her to those facing their own? The notion bred a deeper anxiety. This wasn't simply about the mansion. This was about reaching inside herself, digging into those corners darkened by her own history. As much as she wanted to lead, she wondered if she would find the courage to reveal her truths. Would they still respect her if they knew the depths of her own struggles? An unsettling thought flickered through her mind. The time had come to face not just the house's ghosts but her own. This was about true connection, authentic vulnerability. Sarah took a steadying breath. With an ache for understanding stronger than the fear of exposure, she knew it was time to reveal her story, both as an inspiration and as a plea for acceptance. The weight of impending revelations flooded her senses as she prepared for that first session, and a new truth lingered in the air. She was no longer just a curator of history, but also a participant in her evolving legacy, one that would intertwine with those she aimed to serve. As she stood with her back to the door, her hands clenched around the notes, she felt the stirrings of bravery ignite within her chest. Would she unravel herself in front of them? A door opened, and the townsfolk began to file in. The moment of truth had arrived. The journey toward healing and connection had just begun. Would they embrace her and each other, or would fear hold them captive in the shadows? The atmosphere thickened with expectation as the first townsfolk entered the room. They settled into their chairs, their expressions a curious mix of skepticism and hope. Sarah felt the weight of their gazes. They were searching for something in her, perhaps an anchor, perhaps reassurance. Each familiar face was a reminder of the pain they endured, and with that came an awareness of her own. Heart racing, she adjusted her notes once more. The paper felt damp beneath her fingers. It was as if the stories of the mansion were alive within her, yearning to escape. She envisioned herself as a guide, someone with the power to unlock the deepest chambers of their hearts, yet her own chambers felt tightly barred. Could she inspire others if she couldn't even face the echoes of her past? "Welcome," she began, her voice surprisingly steady despite the turbulence within. Each eye fixed intently on her, searching for credibility. A few nods fueled her determination, a spark that momentarily quelled the storm of doubt. "I'm grateful you all decided to join me today. I trust we can share something profoundly transformative." As she spoke, she recalled the countless hours researching the emotional histories tied to the mansion. The tales of despair clung to the air like the dust that settled thickly in the corners, but they also carried the possibility of healing, the opportunity to rewrite not just their stories but her own as well. Slowly, she led the group into the first exercise, sharing a memory of the mansion, a moment that resonated with each of them. Voices mingled hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. She listened intently, taking in their narratives, the laughter of children, the silence of long-gone relatives, the shadows of lost opportunities. Each story revealed a piece of genuine connection, a thread binding them together in their shared humanity. Yet with every account shared, a pang of mortification clawed at her insides. How many fields had she abandoned in her own life? What specters lingered in her periphery? Choices unmade, paths untaken. She felt the stirring of an internal conflict. As they revealed their wounds, would she be courageous enough to unveil her own? Each moment spent in their company drew her closer to a precipice, a precarious edge tightly linked to both her fears and her resolve. After a few stories there was a pause, an expectant silence hanging in the air as if the group collectively held its breath. They glanced at her, waiting for her to reciprocate, to lead by example. The implications were clear. How could she foster a space of vulnerability if she didn't take the leap herself? Sometimes, she began, swallowing hard, the path toward healing requires us to confront the very things we fear the most. Whispers filled the air as doubt crept into her heart. She considered her own darkened corners, the moments when she faltered, the losses that haunted her. What if it was too much, too raw? Yet in that instant, clarity surged through her. The urgency of authenticity burned like a beacon. "I want to share my story," she declared. Each word falling from her lips was both a release and a confession. "There were failures I thought I could bury, the lost relationships, the decisions that led me here. I've stumbled along the way, just as many of you have." Tentative glances transformed into wide eyes, intrigue mingling with apprehension. Their responses would shape the journey ahead, an unfolding past that would guide them to the present, but also contain unexpected turns. Encouraged by the slight nods that met her admission, she leaned into the wave of shared vulnerabilities. "And that's why I am here. Because I want to explore these wounds with you. Together we can find understanding and perhaps heal. Together, we can unravel the threads of this mansion, and just as importantly, we can unravel our own stories." In that moment she felt something shift within her, a breakthrough, a newfound strength emanating from her willingness to unveil herself. Sarah sensed that they had crossed into uncharted emotional territory, and as she looked around at their faces illuminated by hesitant trust, she understood this was the beginning of something unique. Would the mingling of their ghosts ultimately forge a presence that could thrive? As the session progressed and stories continued to flow like tentative streams, she noticed shifts in their expressions. Perhaps they were ready to confront their own stories as she was hers. Yet one sharp thought pierced through, a continual question. How far was she willing to go in this pursuit? Each earnest tale uncovered a new layer of her own vulnerability, testing her limits. Would this journey reveal strength or expose weakness as the tides of their tales intertwined? She sat up straight, fortified by the ground she was slowly reclaiming, but the challenge loomed large ahead. This wasn't merely a task to be undertaken. It was a call to personal evolution, an imperative task straddling the razor's edge of recovery and revelation. Would she find the capacity to lead while facing the shadows twisting behind her cherished memories? The heavy air thickened once again around her as shadows danced, beckoning. What truths would she still have to contend with? As the final stories floated through the air, Sarah felt threads of connection weaving into a tapestry of understanding. The room, once a cage of doubt, was transforming into a sanctuary filled with collective resolve. Each shared experience not only breathed life back into the mansion, but also reignited passions within Sarah, passions long silenced by the constraints of self-doubt and external expectation. With every narrative exchanged, Sarah felt herself stepping beyond the girl burdened with insecurities. The transformation was palpable. She was no longer an outsider, but an integral part of this community's reclamation story. The fears that had tethered her heart began to dissipate, replaced by an undeniable strength that surged within her. She realized her ambitions could merge seamlessly with life on the ranch. She was both the teacher and the student in this shared journey. Yet she understood that true growth meant confronting her reflections in the shadows, not denying their existence. As the last of the stories came to a close, an overwhelming urge welled inside her, a desire to draw from the well of her own experiences that had long been hidden from sight. "I want to reflect more about why this place matters," she began, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Growing up, I too felt restrained by expectations. I carried the fear of judgment, believing I couldn't forge my path outside of what was comfortable. But each of you has shown me that enduring love for one's stories transcends fear." In that moment of honesty, accompanied by murmurs of understanding, Sarah unveiled her own vulnerability, the heartaches, the dreams she had surrendered to the weight of uncertainty, and the battles fought against feelings of inadequacy. She felt an unyielding connection reverberating through her words, paralleled by reflections in the eyes of her audience, where recognition flickered brightly amidst the recognition of their shared humanity and struggles. "Together we can redefine the essence of this mansion, and more importantly, redefine our own narratives," she catalyzed, her voice summoning energy in the air. "As we paint this place with love, we also have the opportunity to awaken our souls, to acknowledge that our past does not bind us. Instead, it invites us to embark on a journey of betterment." A silence followed. The weight of her declaration hung in the air. It was both an invitation and a celebration of unity, a moment when every person in the room recognized their own narrative within the greater tapestry being woven. Then in a remarkable twist, a newfound elder rose from the back, an unexpected voice of warmth and wisdom. "You are right, Sarah. This mansion is more than a haunted shell. It has been a vessel for our fears. But perhaps in reclaiming it, we do not just restore a building. We restore our spirits. We owe it to ourselves to try." As murmurs of agreement swirled around, Sarah glanced at Jake. She saw a shift in his expression, a ripple of pride illuminating the often murky waters of his past. The town was ready to embrace change, and now she had carved a place for herself, a vital role in leading a collective healing journey. And so, the sessions continued. They visited the mansion. Ghost stories transformed into lively discussions of plans. They reminisced about the laughter once shared within those walls, painting vivid pictures of renewed possibilities. Each commitment to the project solidified Sarah's role as a leader on her own terms. She was establishing herself not as just a voice of ambition, but as a pivotal catalyst for transformation. As time progressed, Sarah watched the mansion evolve alongside her. It became a hub for community dialogue, echoing the laughter and tears shared within its settings. Every repaired wall bore witness to the unraveling of insecurities within each individual, members of the town casting aside fears and judgments, daring to express both vulnerability and bravery. Recognition came steadily. The townsfolk began to see Sarah as the leader she'd longed to be. They championed her efforts, acknowledging her capacity to unite differing voices under the banner of possibility. Invitations for speaking engagements arose, honoring her as a torchbearer for the project. Her impact reached beyond the town limits, inspiring others to confront their own stories. Sarah had proven to herself that jumping into uncertainty could foster true connection and allow her to reclaim her worth. In the end, as the sun set over the restored mansion, casting golden hues across its once blank facade, Sarah stood by Jake, hand in hand. The mansion stood tall, a testament not only to physical revival but to the resilience of its community, a place that encouraged new dreams to flourish. In her eyes sparkled a newfound confidence. She wasn't merely the woman who married the rancher. She was now Sarah, the ambitious architect of healing. The dichotomies that had defined her life interlocked into a fulfilling reality, one where personal fulfillment was no longer at odds with love, ambition, and belonging. She felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with conviction. She had conquered the ghosts within her and illuminated the shadows around them. Now was the moment for new stories to unfold. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.